Welcome to Dating While Tamil, sponsored by myTamilDate.com, the best place to meet Tamil singles from around the globe. Today we have a psychologist here to talk about love, the pursuit, perfection, and those really popular matchmaking shows on Netflix. So I'm here with someone who has a lot of experience in life in general and likes to tell people what to do.
My name is Juliet Anton. I'm a qualified psychologist in the UK, but I do also see clients abroad. I work part-time with what we call in the UK the National Health Service, so the NHS, and then I also work private practice part-time as well. So that's where I get to see kind of different clients, different time zones, very different kind of problems, if I can say it like that, compared to what I get in the NHS. And then more recently, in addition to both the NHS and private work, I also run an app as well. The app's called RStock. It's there to offer psychological support for more kind of minority people, more South Asian background people, because at least in the UK, there's research showing that people from minority background, they struggle to access the support they need when it comes to mental health. So the aim of the app is that we can translate these psychological courses, which I've created in all these different languages, so that people are able to access it from their phones, basically in the languages that they want to use it in.
Well, that's awesome. And I'm not just saying that. I mean, I think around the world, racialized groups and anyone defined as a minority in that particular area, they are always getting the short end of the stick when it comes to something as ambiguous, let's say, as mental health, right? You got the old guard saying, "Oh, just try harder, you'll be fine." So, we all, I think, grew up with something like that, and it's great to see that even from different pockets of the world, you have things as small as an app you think can help you so greatly. Congratulations on that. That's awesome.
Thank you, Ari. Thank you.
So would you say that you deal with the very basic love questions a lot?
You'd be surprised. I do. I think, sometimes I've considered calling myself a matchmaker sometimes, but I won't go as far as that because I've not got any experience in that realm. But the thing that has been interesting for me is when it comes to kind of my private work, people get really surprised. A lot of the questions that I get from my clients is more relationship orientated. And I'm saying relationship in a broad sense. It could be family relationships, romantic relationships, friendships. But yeah, it's really interesting that more in the private realm, people are more interested in kind of what works for them, what doesn't work for them. And a lot of the time they have to go into the past to kind of understand how they've dealt with things, or how the other person has treated them, and whether, in the moment they're not quite sure how to deal with it, so they deal with it the best they can. But more so, the bit where I would come in is that they might kind of think about, okay, something's off. I'm not sure this is what I want for myself. Or, when they've got this kind of confusion, that's when they might contact someone like me, and I would kind of go through what's kind of happened in the past and be like, is this what you want? You want something different? How would you change things? So I think relationships, for me anyway, from how I understand it, is such an integral part of life. And so it's really important to talk about it, to explore it. I don't think there's any right or wrong answers in the questions I get asked, and I don't know what the right and wrong answer is. What I can do is give different perspectives and kind of see where the client would want to take it.
Well, I got to say, you definitely got the, from a North American perspective, you definitely got the voice and the intonation to be in your position. Everyone will be like, well, she certainly knows what she's talking about. You did mention matchmaking. And so you said you don't have a lot of experience with that. Even in your personal life, have you set up anyone that you know?
No experience. No. I think I get a bit too anxious because I'm like, it's actually a lot of responsibility personally, I feel. So no experience. No, apart from Indian matchmaking and Jewish matchmaking on Netflix, no experience. No.
Have you watched both?
I did. I had loads of people talking about Indian matchmaking, so I was like, okay, let me go and check it out. And then this is why I avoid Netflix, because I'm really bad at kind of doing episodes. I binge. So then what happens is I did like the entire thing. Don't ask me why. I just, anyway, it was good. It was good.
I would say that then you're really good at Netflix, because that's what they want you to do.
Yeah, I'm like their like candid person for what they're selling Netflix for. And then recently I came across Jewish matchmaking, actually. So I was just really curious because it's a different culture, but same concept. So that was quite interesting. It was an interesting contrast, I think, to kind of watch. Yeah.
Do you find that there's any commonality between their diaspora and ours, as represented in the show, at least?
I mean, I don't believe as much in the caste system that there is in the Tamil community, but I know it's there. It is out there. And there was something very similar in the Jewish community as well, which was really interesting. So some people had a preference of staying within the same community. Others were quite open to trying out a different community within the Jewish community. That was quite interesting. The other thing I thought was quite nice was they will talk about not just the two people kind of joining together, but two families joining together. That is something quite interesting as well. I know more in our Tamil community, or the more east away we go, we're more community based. So we're more about us, the family, we, the community, the culture, compared to like the Western world, where a lot of therapy is about you and how do you improve your self-confidence and your image and your identity. So it was, in that sense, Indian matchmaking was something that was more kind of relatable, I would say, for in terms of like the Tamil community. I was surprised that the Jewish community had a similar understanding as well. So it was about the family and wanting someone that's family orientated, which is quite interesting.
Because a lot of media is created in North America, we get this North American perspective all the time. So it's really good to hear your perspective on, just as a viewer, just watching that and then relating it to yourself and the communities that we're a part of. Why do you think these shows are so popular now? I mean, so many people are now rejecting love in a certain sense, but then they're binge watching this, like you just said, right? So
yeah. I mean, I have a few thoughts on this. I don't think there's, again, one answer to it. I think it's popular because it's new. It almost feels like a trend, like an upcoming trend now, being kind of having a matchmaker. And to be honest, I say it's a trend. Personally, I mean, I'm married. I didn't have a matchmaker, but I have always known in the background that there are matchmakers where, you know, in our community they would give our horoscopes and kind of check for like within which age range is best for you to get married and kind of what the other person's horoscope's like and all that kind of stuff. So I am aware of it. I think more so now, because it's on TV and therefore it's going to get more exposure, more people are going to watch it. I think that's one thing that I think has made it become more popular. Whereas I wonder where in the past it's not necessarily something that's kind of spoken about or acknowledged. It may be spoken about and acknowledged within our Tamil community, for example, or South Asian community, but it might not necessarily be something that's spoken outside of it. So by putting it on TV, you've got the entire world that's exposed to that. And so that might be one of the reasons why there's more kind of popularity to the concept. And I also wonder whether there is, by putting like the best couples, the ones that are not so difficult, they kind of got together in their first match. I wonder whether that gives the kind of illusion that actually there's hope there. You know, it's actually not that complicated of a process, as if a relationship is not complicated or a marriage is not complicated. But it gives you that kind of fairy tale kind of illusion as well. And I think that's quite catchy for people. I think for me, when I was kind of watching these shows, I was really curious about the people themselves. I think we can get quite carried away in the process of matchmaking and things like that, but actually there is a person that you know they're dealing with, and they're obviously going to come with their likes, their dislikes, their baggage, or possibly even their clean slate. Some people might even want to kind of go on not a process, but a journey of, okay, let me sort myself out, and then I'll try this matchmaking process or finding a relationship. So I think it's nice to see all these different journeys of different people come together. Yeah, that's kind of where I was at with it. I mean, I'm not going to lie. There were some people that I thought, you're quite interesting. And there was others I was like, honestly, like, why are you on the show? But you know what? You get a mix, isn't it? That's the whole point of it. You get a mix.
I think it's, I think a couple things, especially on the Indian matchmaking show, like you have Seema, the matchmaker, who's the most successful matchmaker of all time, who has really no success apparently, but it's still on the show. I feel like they need to get maybe like, they need to make almost like a reality show, not that this isn't, but where there's multiple matchmakers and they all have a journy, kind of like Selling Sunset or something. I think that would be a little more interesting, because I feel like your main protagonist in Seema is not, in my opinion, she doesn't capture my attention as well. But maybe that's the point, like just to keep her in the background.
No, you definitely, you've got a point there. And do you know what's really interesting? When I was watching the Jewish matchmaking, my impression of it was that she was much younger and she was more kind of, I think there is something about the generation that you might be kind of matchmaking with. So for example, like you said, with Seema Auntie, she's in a totally different generation to the generation that I feel she's trying to match up, help. And it's more so kind of, there is this kind of putting traditional values into the more kind of younger generation one, which I'm not quite sure how successful she is with that. I have my opinions about it, but I also feel that that culture thing that I was talking about. So she's coming from a more kind of South Asian, more eastwards culture where it is about the family, the community. I think she also mentioned some people, they don't even see each other until the day they get married, for example.
Of course.
And then you're then bringing those sorts of concepts, horoscopes and all of those sorts of concepts into the Western culture where, yes, there are people that come from a South Asian background, but what's happened over time is that by living in a more kind of westernized culture, they've had to embed both cultures together to be able to find their place. And that's actually quite difficult. I feel like it's a unique journey in that sense. And so then bringing these, I guess, putting more weight on these traditional values and not necessarily acknowledging the differences in a culture where New York and stuff, where it's more Western and it's a different way of thinking. I think that's where the clash happens for me, in the way that she's dealt with it in her show. Whereas what I found quite interesting with the Jewish matchmaking was, I think there are certain kind of, from what I remember, I think that matchmaker was quite liberal, so she wasn't as religious, she was saying, and then she moved over to becoming quite religious. And yes, there's the traditions and the concepts and stuff that's there, but it was I felt it was more relatable, more interesting, though there was more complexity, I would say, that was kind of captured from her part, as opposed to the Indian matchmaking. But I think when you think about entertainment, I would say you get a bit more entertainment with the Indian matchmaking side of the show, as opposed to, I mean, not that Jewish matchmaking isn't as entertaining, but yeah, it was more, I would say, more relatable Jewish matchmaking was, in terms of like the younger generation compared to Indian matchmaking.
That's interesting. I think like I think people from a younger generation, they get into a lot of political discussions, gender politics, race politics, all that stuff. But as you grow, you realize that it's the one divide that people actually relate to is classism. And like you said, the Indian matchmaking does have some of that involved, and it's a little more of an old school thread because of Seema Auntie, whereas, something very similar in the diaspora of the Jewish culture is something like that as well, right? So it's interesting that it does run a little younger. I wonder if the producers saw that let's go a little younger, skew a little younger, and it might get a better audience or something. I wonder.
Maybe. And now that you mentioned that as well, Ari, just a quick thought. I think there's also something about, I mean, I'm talking about younger generation, older generation, but I think there's also a difference in kind of mindset as well. So I feel like how can I put this? When we think about kind of back home again, Tamil community, there is that kind of hierarchical system, isn't it? And so I guess in the past, let's take my parents or even people living back in Sri Lanka who are let's say our age. There is this thing about, because it's so kind of community focused, that you are allowing kind of elders in the family or parents or respectable people, they are taking decisions for you, and that's just part of life, I guess, in their kind of world. Whereas when you think about us kind of migrating, or not even migrating, parents migrating, but we're born in more Western countries. When it comes to our mindset, we're more about kind of being more independent, making our own decisions. We're open-minded to kind of hear people's perspectives, but at the same time, ultimately, we want that kind of independence and making our own decisions, isn't it? And I think that's also a little bit of a clash, depending on whichever culture, however they matchmake. If you've got independent people, some people are going to find that threatening. Some people are going to find that that's the qualities that they want. Whereas if you've got people who are more kind of compliant, not as independent, they're quite happy to kind of go with the flow, then again, those are qualities that some people might want and others might not want. So I think there's something there about kind of mindset and mentality there as well, not necessarily to do with age, more so I guess maybe upbringing or life experiences, if we can put it like that.
It seems like hiring a matchmaker isn't cheap, right? So it seems like there is a classism directly embedded into the fact that someone's on this show, or maybe there's something we don't know about how they, maybe there's a bursary for it or something, aside from the entertainment, which is a great positive. What do you think the greatest con is for these type of shows in terms of the viewer? You think it's like kind of showing them a skewed environment or influencing them to date or find relationships or love in a different way? Maybe in an unrealistic way?
I wonder whether it opens more options for people. So as opposed to just dating apps, I wonder whether there is something about maybe trying out a matchmaker. I wonder whether it's about, because how I was mentioning in the past, I mean, growing up, I have heard about people being matched with horoscopes and stuff. But I think, my experience has been that a lot of kind of my peers, if I can take it like that, I don't think I could think of anyone who's had a matchmaker. Everyone's more on the end of kind of, getting to know people, pursuing people, trying to see if the relationship works, if they feel like it's long-term, settling down. So I wonder whether there might be something about it being a tradition or a practice that's not necessarily dying out, Ari, but has kind of gone on the quieter end because people are more pursuing what they want. And so by showing that, it still works, look how successful it is, and kind of showing examples of it, because a lot of them, they show examples of married couples who have kind of been married for 20, 30, 40 years. It might be their way of saying, actually, look, this is something that works. It's maybe something that's going a bit quieter now. Let's kind of, re-explore it. I wonder whether there's something like that going on.
I do love that aspect of the show probably the most, to the fact that they have that couch and they show these unrelated, experienced relationships and their little talking points. I think that is an underrated part of the show.
Yeah, for sure. And I think there's also something about, I wonder whether people might be putting a lot of pressure on themselves in terms of trying to find the right one, maybe. And so one way of kind of coming around that is possibly kind of falling back on that support system. So when I say support system, that could be family, that could be friends, that could be, I don't know, professional matchmaker. But the idea being that the pressure doesn't have to maybe be on you as an individual trying to find the right one. Maybe you can like pull on all these kind of resources, and maybe that could help you find the right match for you. I wonder whether there's something along those lines that they might be promoting. I'm not too sure. But I think the key here is that one size doesn't fit all. So it might work for one person, it might not. Something else might work for another person, it might not. So I think that's something that we need to kind of bear in mind, I think, when it comes to dating and relationships and things like that.
Maybe in the past, the matchmakers were always like someone in the village, a family member, that evolved to, friends and still family, but like, younger family, hopefully. And then it became strictly a social thing where maybe you're at a party and one of your friends actually says in their matchmaker voice, hey, have you met Ted? Or have you met this person? Right. And that's it. And that's the small 30-second matchmaker that you had. It was just your friend that just helped you or wing personed you to your significant other or potential. And I think having these new matchmaker shows, I think, to the younger audience that there is that industry where someone can actually professionally match you up with a data sheet like it's Pokemon, and you have strengths and weaknesses. Like if you're, lightning Pokemon, you can't take out the rock, right? Or something. So, shout out to Pikachu. But I think it's interesting that now we've had that the apps and their heyday is now kind of here. And the matchmaker is now an algorithm based on your preferences, and it's replacing Seema Auntie, and I guess that's why she's there full force. And I think it's an interesting thing, like you said, no, it's not one size fits all, and everyone can just kind of match with whomever they feel they want to at the comfort of their own home. And whether that's a great thing or a bad thing, I wonder what the next form of matchmaker is. And right now, that's where we're at. So I think it's good to show different aspects of that.
No, of course. I think for me, the bit that I personally struggle with is, again, for me, it's about seeing someone for who they are. And it's really, we try not to reduce someone or categorize someone or label someone in a particular way, because that one label, for me, I feel like we're too complicated for that kind of stuff. One label is just not going to cut it, And so for me, when I think about stuff like matchmaking, when you're kind of looking at like height or hair color or eye color or your education or your job or whatever, my fear is that the person looking for the other might lose how can I say, that they're kind of categorized for all these points, but the person behind those categories aren't necessarily seen. Of course, that's the opportunity where they get to kind of meet each other and kind of see if it clicks and whether they want to go on more dates and things like that. But that initial process, for me, I don't know, something's a bit, I think jarring is the word for me. Something's a bit kind of, it's not about, I know someone, you know someone, okay, let's get them to meet. There's just something more about the more specifics of categories.
I look at it like sometimes within the realm of sports, where you have certain players for certain positions because they fit that position. There's like stats and build, like, physical build and mentality and what they're good at, where they like to go on the floor, let's say, and shoot or what have you. And I think matchmaking and dating apps is kind of the same thing. Like, if love it or hate it, you are categorized in a weird way. And I think in like when Tinder came out as like one of the most famous ones out there for the masses, people started putting their just preferences on what they're looking for, instead of just saying,
it's easy, isn't it, to kind of filter out what you want, what you don't want, or what you want other people to see and not necessarily see. It works.
And I found that like those who I identified as women started putting their own height so they know that if they're looking for a man, let's say they wanted someone taller than them, right? Because that's such a big thing in looking for love that way. So they would put their own height just to weed out anyone who's not that height. So someone like me, I would look at that and like, oh, as a short king myself, I'd be like, oh, okay, I can't, she won't respect me. So I can't, even if I swipe right or whatever, they won't look at me in a second way. Do you find that even though everyone wants to put their best foot forward and look, do you find that they're looking for too much? Like there's too much perfection out there that they perceive as perfection?
I mean, again, perfection is a complicated concept of self, isn't it? I think it would be what my idea of perfection is might not necessarily be, for example, what your idea of perfection is, Ari. So I think already there, it's complicated. It's not that straightforward.
So it's, I feel like you've just said you've lost the battle if you're looking for perfection right away, right? Like you
but with
showed up.
Perfectionism, that's basically what happens. We do lose a battle, isn't it? So I think that's something it's interesting because I think it's at the end of the day when we think about a relationship, for me, I think relationships are about taking risks. It's about being vulnerable. It's a learning process, if I could describe it like that. And I think if we are, I mean, it depends on the individual, but if we are going in with that sort of perfectionist mindset, I mean, there's two ways of looking at it. The first thing I would think is good on you, because it sounds like you know what you want. You know what you want, you know what you don't want. You're not there to kind of waste time. You're quite clear about, you've got clarity there. And that's a good thing, I reckon. It's you just kind of get on with it. Whereas I think the more difficult side of it is that some people can be left feeling quite disappointed. So they might be putting their perfect self forward and then be disappointed by how they're treated. Or it might be the other way around. They're looking for perfection on the other end and then be disappointed by what they receive. And so I think ultimately for me, I feel like ultimately it comes to kind of values and morals that we might hold. So what I mean by that is if we are, for example, open-minded, we're not, I don't think we're going to look for something very specific and like hold on to it and say, this is exactly what I want. I'm not negotiating on this. Whereas if, for example, we're a bit more like kind of, let's say, more kind of black and white thinking, we're clear cut about what we want and what we don't want. For someone like that, when there's not going to be much negotiating or, oh, let me give it a shot. It's going to be quite black and white, whatever's on paper. Okay, have I got what I've got on paper? Okay, let me go with that. So I think it depends on the person, their personalities, their values, their morals in terms of how they go forward with it. Again, I don't think there's a right or wrong way of doing it. I think it's probably kind of the person, that their personality. But just taking you back as well to that bit where I was talking about people coming to me going, this and this happened. I don't feel too great about it. I want to kind of improve my way of how I am in this relationship, or I want to become more confident in myself. I want to do things differently. In some ways, we kind of have to go into the past to kind of understand what's happened, maybe even why that's happened, and then make the decision of, okay, is this what I want for myself, or do I want something totally different? And then give it, whatever it is, give it a shot with the new thing that we're going to go for. So, yeah, I think, it's a bit of a sticky one.
I think we've learned from you that there's no one size fits all. Obviously, seems very cliche. Looking for perfection is a losing battle, and that your rants on everything rival mine, except yours are lengthier, and I would learn something from you.
Yeah, no, you're never going to get a straight answer from a psychologist. That I'll give you.
I think that's the tagline for today. But I would want to say before we wrap up very quickly, even though there is no one size fits all, from your experience, from your this is more of a personal question almost. What are a couple green flags and red flags you have when meeting someone?
Couple green flags, couple red flags. Let me start off with red flags, because that's probably what
easy.
Exactly. So I think in terms of red flags, I think you're never going to get 100% good or 100% bad. You're going to get 100% both. So I think there's something about, you are most probably going to see the kind of the positive qualities in someone when you initially meet them. But I think it's more when you kind of spend time with them or go on more dates with them. And the one thing I would say, which again goes against our culture, our Tamil community culture, but, unless you live with that person, you're not going to get a real feel for what it's like and whether you'd be able to last in that. But
a lot of people are rolling their eyes right now.
I bet they are. So that's something to kind of bear in mind, that it's 100% both, not just good, not just bad. I think similarities between people, I feel, is what brings them together. When I say people, the couple, similarities is what I feel brings the couple together, because it's relatable. Whereas being open to differences, I think, is where the work is, because ultimately, again, even if you're identical twins, there is still going to be differences in identical twins. So we're not going to meet anyone necessarily that's us. And I think that's what makes us unique. And it's about having that kind of open-mindedness to be able to give space for that difference. And I guess the green flag, which has always worked for me, and it's worked so far. I've known my now husband for 16 years. It takes two people to tango. That's the one thing that really makes me ride. So, there are so many times where we're both not on the same page. And that's okay. I think not being on the same page, like I was saying about the differences, that's the whole point of being able to kind of, accommodate for a different perspective or a different understanding on things. I mean, I'll be honest with you, I probably stick to how I understand things, and I probably argue that I'm always right. But there are moments where I'm like, actually, you know what, you've got a point, and it's about that give and take. I think that works. I'm not the stubborn one, by the way, in the relationship. I work really hard to maintain this relationship.
That's awesome. I wouldn't want to get into an argument with you.
What's that?
I wouldn't want to get into an argument with you.
No. I want to think I'm quite flexible and open-minded. No, I think I am. But like I said, I think it is two different people, two different upbringing, two different values, two different morals. It's difference. It's two differences coming together. So I think we all need to be realistic about making it work. If we put our minds to make it work, it's going to work. But equally, if a relationship is not working, I wouldn't want someone to stay in that relationship. Again, that's where the morals and values and things like that come in. If it's not okay, it's not okay, isn't it? So yeah, you try again.
But I will say, for all the people who don't agree with you and having someone live together before the tying
I'll be open for comments. I'll be open for debate.
I wasn't saying that please slide into her DMs and yell at her. I was going to say an alternative is to hopefully travel with that person and see how they are under pressure. There's always that tried and true. Travel with that person, see how they treat people in the service industry. And when there's a crisis, when there's a fight, when something's not perfect, how are they reacting and how are you reacting to how they react? And then that's my non-clinical advice, I suppose.
Yeah. I would also like to know who the parents, or at least the people are, who agree for that holiday before marriage as well. I think we're on similar grounds. Living together, holiday, it's same thing, isn't it?
A little bit. I know. I feel like it's a softer blow, but someone of a different mindset would be like, "Whoa, you're traveling to I don't know. Is that a hotel? What?" I
think the key there, like you said, is spending time, isn't it? The more you spend time with someone, the more you would learn from them, and then you work out whether it's going to work or not. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for all this insight. I know, like, most people have no idea what a psychologist does or how they interpret the world, so they probably think you're a strange,
contact us. We're more than happy to let anyone know how we work. So yeah, contact us.
Absolutely. Thank you for this, and thank you for coming on and spending some time with me and our audience. If you have a final say, you can have that, or we could just part ways here.
No, no, thank you for having me. Thank you so much.